Great. Well, welcome to today's HathiTrust Community Week session titled Strengthening Diversity in the HathiTrust Digital Library. I'm Heather Welton. I'm the Shared Print Program Officer for HathiTrust, and my preferred pronouns are she and her, and I'm the facilitator for this event. A new slide, Sawa? Thanks. Before I turn it over to our presenters for this session, I want to take a minute to remind everyone that HathiTrust events adhere to our member meeting and community week code of conduct, which can be found on our website, is posted on the slide on the screen now, and will be posted to the chat shortly. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. So Wade.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our session this afternoon. My name is Wade Wyckoff, and I'm an Associate University Librarian at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the HathiTrust Digital Collection Strategy Working Group. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, go back to housekeeping, Sawa. Thanks. So just a few housekeeping details before we get started with the session. We wanted the session to be a conversation with you as HathiTrust members, and the working group has framed 2 questions as discussion starters that we'll get to in just a moment. We encourage you to share your thoughts either in the chat or by raising your virtual hand, and one of our facilitators from the working group will call on you. You should be aware that the session today is being recorded and will be publicly available. The chat log will also be captured at the end of the session, but it will only be for the use of the working group. It will not be made publicly accessible. Live transcripts and captions are available of the session for those who would like to activate them. And hashtags for Twitter and the HathiTrust community Slack channel are on the slide, and we encourage you to continue the conversation there. Next slide, please. So if you were at the member meeting last week, some of this will be familiar, and I apologize for that. But for those who weren't with us last week, just some quick background. The Digital Collection Strategy Working Group is a newly created group, and we're just in our first year of activity. We have a really strong roster of members, which you can see here on the slide, that's drawn from across the HathiTrust membership in both the US and Canada, and from the HathiTrust staff. The working group members bring expertise in collections, special collections and archives, digitization and digital collections, and scholarly communications, as well as a range of institutional perspectives to our discussions. The link to our charge is on the slide and I think has been added to the chat already. I won't spend too much time talking about the charge, but I did just want to mention a couple of points very briefly. First, the charge for the Digital Collection Strategy Working Group builds on the good work done by the previous Collections Committee, which was one of HathiTrust's long-running standing committees. That committee was closed at the time that our working group was established, but we really appreciate all of the work that that previous group did over the years and have brought some of the outcomes and the products of that work into our discussions. Secondly, the charge for the new working group focuses on building and diversifying the HathiTrust digital library through targeted collection development. We're asked by the Program Steering Committee to explore possibilities and the priorities of HathiTrust members for collection building and for strengthening diversity in the collection, and to identify potential pilot projects that could be approached collaboratively. Next slide, please. Our charge also asks us to engage with the HathiTrust membership around Hathi's digital collection, and it's in that spirit that we're here with you today. The working group has had some very good discussions over the past few months. We've talked with members of the HathiTrust staff. We've explored some areas, some possible areas for targeted collection development. And we're happy to share some of our ideas, but we really want this to be a time to hear from you as HathiTrust members. We want to hear your thoughts and ideas to help inform our thinking around potential projects and our planning for more engagement with HathiTrust members in the future. With that in mind, we've framed a couple of discussion questions that we hope will spark a good conversation this afternoon. 2 of my working group colleagues, Salwa and Miranda, have agreed to lead that discussion, and at this point, I'd like to hand the session off to them.
So thank you, Wade. Thank you, everyone. At this point, I am stepping out of the slide presentation mode so we can actually have this conversation. You're welcome to put your questions in chat. We're monitoring the chat, and you're also welcome to raise your hand, and in the participants menu, we'll see your hand raised and we would love to hear from you. So if you're seeing my chat and my participants windows, please, I apologize because I have to keep those on site here so I can see who's raising their hand. So our first question here is, for those of you who are in the call right now with us, do you know what your organization is doing with regard to collection development to address underrepresentation? How does this overlap with your organization's digitization strategy? And what do you think HathiTrust should do to address this underrepresentation in the digital library? You are welcome to raise your hand. I'll call upon you so we can begin an active discussion, and or you're also welcome to put your thoughts in chat and we can read them out loud so we can begin discussion. And you don't have to answer these questions or discuss them. I shouldn't say answer, discuss these questions in the same order. So you could start with, how do you think your organization is addressing the overlap in the digitization strategy? Or you could start with, how do you think HathiTrust can address underrepresentation in the digital library? Any thoughts for those members who are here? And once again, the chat will not be made available publicly. Are there thoughts around what you all think, the members of the audience, in what we can do to address any underrepresentation, or do you have thoughts around the underrepresentation that exists? Thank you. We're getting comments coming in here. Yes. Okay. So some of the thoughts that have been echoed so far are, you'd like to see some intentional scanning of underrepresented works. At OSU, they've launched a social justice and collections initiative. They had an earlier collection digitization strategy initiative that is continuing and it had from its time of launch diversity as one of its focuses. Do we have a sense of how much HathiTrust content comes in via Google Books program? That's an interesting question. Its focus on public domain, renewal period, etc. Items will make it automatically more white male. And then again, if you would like to start talking about this, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Duke's, we have another comment that's come in saying, Duke's actively seeking ways to increase inclusion in our non-curricular collections, working with vendors, etc., on what we buy in print and online. So I would like to pose a question back for the universities that are actively looking to increase inclusion. When you digitize these materials, do you then submit them to HathiTrust as well so that HathiTrust's collection or corpus can include these items, or is it limited to your local repositories or access or discovery platforms? Any other? Okay. Okay, so Google scans what we send. So if we select more intentionally, yes, what we send, it'll pass through Google Books to HathiTrust. There's an Internet Archive scribe, and everything we put on that goes into HathiTrust. So these items are getting added to HathiTrust corpus. Other than Google Books, our digitization efforts have been around archival material that wouldn't feed into HathiTrust. That's true. We've seen comparable threads at our libraries as well. I would like to focus on, so Aaron has a question here which says, I'm really interested in hearing to what extent people have material that they could digitize and contribute that would address underrepresentation areas in the collection, but the existing workflows and support to contribute to HathiTrust are too difficult or labor intensive. We've had a few other comments come in, which says we always prioritize inclusive requests, especially for those things that we can't license. Yes, that is important, particularly around materials that we cannot purchase ebooks for or license them in another format. Love more information on what is underrepresented in Hathi that matches our collection. That's an interesting comment, Carla. That is something that the working group has been thinking and discussing, and it's great to hear it being echoed here, that it would be good to know what is underrepresented in Hathi that matches the collections that the member libraries have. I'd like us to define what we mean by underrepresentation we want to address. Lots and lots of things are underrepresented. That's actually an interesting comment again, Jeff. Yes, it would be nice to define then what do we mean by that underrepresentation. I would like to draw on here a comment that Aaron had added, and then I will pass on to the next discussion question that we can have, is it's also the third bullet point in this discussion question, which is, as you're all member libraries, you're all HathiTrust member library representatives, what do you think we can or should do to address underrepresentation in digital libraries, besides, as Jeff says, define what underrepresentation means? Because you're right, that is something we should be able to do, define what underrepresentation means. But are there other things that should be done that we can think to plan around that might help address underrepresentation? And yes, please, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll open it up for panel participation. You can speak out loud. We'll unmute you. If anyone would like to raise their hands, you can go to the participant panel and just raise your hand. Jessica, I'm not seeing any raised hands. Are you?
I don't know if Jessica can talk.
Okay.
No. Oh, there are some now. Yes.
Oh, great. Would you like, I can unmute. So I'll unmute Holly first. Holly?
Hi. I'm probably not answering the question you just asked, but back in March, when we had closed the library building to patrons, we were still doing like pulls and holds for pickup. And I knew that the emergency temporary access service was coming, and I was doing comparisons of requests to what was available in HathiTrust. And what I realized, and it surprised me, I thought that UT Knoxville would not have particularly diverse collections. And I realized that we have really good collections on the LGBT experience in the South, the Black experience in Appalachia. And so when we are more fully back in the library, what we plan to do is focus on some of those items that we have that would contribute to the diversity of the HathiTrust corpus.
Thank you. That is indeed very interesting. Yes. We had another raised hand. I'm sorry, and now I don't see it.
I believe it was Jessica to show
Okay.
people. So I think we're good.
Okay. All right, well, with this, I will pass on to the second discussion question that my colleague Miranda will facilitate.
Thank you so much, Sala. This is it's really exciting to see all these comments come in through the chat. And I will say it is great to see all these names that I will unfortunately not be seeing in Charleston next week. So I'll see a lot of you online, but see a lot of familiar names from the collections community. That's wonderful. So the first question, or the first set of questions we had, was really focused on where would we like to be, where would we like HathiTrust to be, where do we see opportunities. But we know, and this started to come out in the chat already, that there are barriers, there are challenges involved in making the HathiTrust digital library more inclusive, addressing some of those issues around underrepresentation. So our second set of questions asks you to reflect a little bit on where you see barriers and challenges, whether it's your own library, reasons that you might not be contributing to the HathiTrust digital collection, or you may not be contributing the kinds of things that would address some of these issues. So there have been a few things that have come up in the chat already, some things around workflow, potentially requirements like that. I think Rice raised a really interesting question, which I don't think we have talked about yet in the working group, about the possibility of including content from public libraries. So there may be library types that have not, over the course of HathiTrust's history, had the opportunity to contribute. So what thoughts do you all have about barriers or challenges to expanding the digital library, to making it more inclusive, more comprehensive? So Jeff has commented it might help if HathiTrust could accept born digital material. Very good point, and could deposit more, especially from our university press. And Duke has some, has a really good track record with inclusive titles, so that would be great, more cheaply and quickly. So that's an interesting thought. If the digitization workflow is a barrier, let's just get the stuff that's already available digitally. I also want to note that Natalie from the HathiTrust staff has said about 95% of the HathiTrust collection is via the Google Books workflow. So in response to a question that came up earlier. All right, so we have a comment about, is there a way to better know what partner libraries are contributing? So I think this has come up a couple times now in the chat, this idea of, well, if we'd had a better sense of what was needed to diversify and address some of the representational issues in the digital library, maybe we locally at our library could look for opportunities to diversify and to make different kinds of contributions. So that's a great suggestion. So many HathiTrust member libraries have enormous collections, and of course prioritizing what to digitize and what to send off to HathiTrust. Those are really important decisions. All right, and Jessica's reminding us if you want to speak out loud. So Salwa, if you see a hand up, let me know.
Okay.
Okay, we have a question from Jeff about, can HathiTrust accommodate archival materials, or are we only going to take traditionally published materials? And this is something we've talked about a little bit in the working group, but I think is really worth thinking about. So often the archival content is what our libraries are prioritizing for digitization, and how could we expand the value of that digitization and make those often quite rare or even entirely unique materials available to the community.
And I would like to point out that we have these discussion questions so that your comments and your thoughts and the suggestions that you provide us with today will help guide some of the work that the Digital Collections Working Group is doing to make recommendations around what we can do to reduce these barriers, or what we can do to help bring these conversations more to the forefront or give more priority. So we do welcome your comments and thoughts around what can be done. And if you raise your hand, I'm monitoring here, I will ask to unmute you, and we'll unmute you at that point.
All right, so this is a great comment from Scott, ability to compare the gaps in HathiTrust with different kinds of lists, alternative press index, and other radical color lines, LGBTQ, NB, labor history, and so on. So that's a great idea. I mean, there are some collection assessment pieces that go along with identifying those gaps, looking for places where we feel representation is not as it should be. So looking for some of those existing resources that we can take advantage of to compare the collection against. And given HathiTrust's excellent experience with large scale compare and contrast kind of research, I think there's some real potential there. Scott, you got a +1 from Jeff. So that's, there's definitely interest in that approach. As we were preparing for this session, we did get some statistics about people who had registered, and I think we were told maybe about half of the folks who had signed up for this session were at libraries that are already contributing to the HathiTrust digital library. My library is one we just started within the past couple of months, got our first content in. It was very exciting. But for those of you who represent libraries that have not yet contributed to the digital library, are there specific reasons that your library has chosen not to do that? And Rice notes that the Google Books program itself does present some barriers, and perhaps that libraries that might use that as their primary or sole channel into HathiTrust might consider some other options. That's a very good suggestion, and mentioned specifically special collections material that might be in fragile condition. Yes, excellent point. Yeah, that so much of the content is coming through Google, that Google's barriers are very real as when we think about it collectively. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Miranda, I'm not seeing any raised hands, so I'm presuming all the discussion's happening on the chat channel here.
Looks like it. We got some fast fingers out there. Yeah, I understand. Chat can work really well. Yeah, a great thought from Jeff, that libraries that, you know, digitizing material, getting the metadata prepped and all of that does take a lot of resources. It takes money and it takes time. And might there be ways that we could work collectively and collaboratively to support that in order to gather some of that content that is sitting in libraries that maybe don't have that infrastructure in place, don't have those resources. Okay, so a comment from Patty. Our library is at the end stages of joining. Well, congratulations, welcome. And one question was about the collection development policy. What from our collection would be most valuable to contribute? Hoping for guidance on this in the near future. Well, we're hoping as well, and we're actually kind of responsible for that. So yes, absolutely. And what a great thing to be able to share with libraries as they're coming on board as new members to give some sense of, you know, if you're interested in contributing, that would be great. Here are some areas that we're really interested in expanding the digital library. All right, we got time. We have time for a couple more comments if folks want to put anything in the chat. I like that this is, even though it's a conversation about barriers and challenges, it's still very positive. I think we have a lot of really constructive ideas coming through. And several things that our working group has talked about a lot, but you all are coming up with several things I don't think we've said anything about. So that's great. That's exactly what we were hoping to get out of these sessions. Yeah, so the chair sends his appreciation as well. All right, and Carla notes we've been very focused on pre-23 content until recently. How do we collectively want to tackle potential orphans? Yeah, so copyright issues, and it was interesting. I was at the user engagement task force session earlier, and there's a lot of appreciation for the copyright work that HathiTrust does. So combining that with building the digital library is a great idea. And Rice comments that his library created its own barriers for earlier participation in Google Books, and so now the content that they have via ETOS is a little haphazard. Yes, I understand that. All right, well, I know Wade wanted a minute or two to wrap things up, so I will turn it back over to him. But thank you all so much. I think this was a really great discussion, and you saved us some note-taking time, because we can just, our working group will really be able to use this chat transcript to continue our work. So Wade, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thanks to all of you for that really interesting and active discussion in the chat, and to those who raised their hands and spoke on the recording. That's fantastic. Thanks to Miranda and Salwa for facilitating such a great conversation. There's a skill in that, and I really appreciate them taking that on for us. So in closing, just some next steps. The working group will be reviewing the notes and the chat log from today's session to help inform the next stage of our work as we start framing out some possibilities for collection building in a little bit more detail. We'll also be planning some additional ways and opportunities to connect with you as Hathi members, and working with the HathiTrust staff and the other working groups and task forces who are also active and engaging in some of these areas. And we'll share those opportunities with the members. So keep an eye out, there will be more coming from us as we continue our work. If you'd like to share any comments directly with the working group, or if you would be willing to be contacted as part of the working group's outreach activities, please feel free to contact me, and I will share that with the rest of the working group. My contact details are on the next slide. So Salwa, if you could go ahead. And in closing, I'll just say thank you again to all of you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And we will look forward to future opportunities to talk with you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and a survey will be shared following this event later today. Have a good day.